You've seen the movies. The noble samurai, gleaming armor catching sunlight, katana singing through the air, dying with perfect grace beneath cherry blossoms. The Bushido code, honor above all. Now erase that image, burn it. Because if you were an Ashigaru, a common foot soldier, your life didn't just suck. It was a relentless grind of mud, blood, starvation, and being treated like a disposable farming tool that occasionally stabbed people. You weren't living a Bushido fantasy. You were a meat shield in someone else's power trip, a nameless number in a warlord's ledger of expendable assets. No cherry blossoms, no poetry, just you, a bamboo spear, and the growing certainty that you're probably going to die face down in a rice paddy fighting for a lord whose name you can barely pronounce. Let's talk about the real life of Japan's medieval cannon fodder, the Ashigaru.
The myth versus reality. Modern pop culture has sold you a lie. From Kurosawa's masterpieces to Ghost of Tsushima, the image is always the same. Disciplined, honorable samurai living by the ancient Bushido code. Here's the thing. That version of Bushido is historical fan fiction. The romantic warrior code was largely manufactured centuries after the fighting stopped. Polished during the peaceful Edo period, weaponized as propaganda during World War II. Real medieval Japan was less honorable warrior poet and more whoever has the biggest army and doesn't starve first wins. And that romanticized code? It only applied to the samurai elite. The Ashigaru, who made up the vast majority of any army, were explicitly excluded from this honor system. Spoiler, nobody was quoting philosophy while knee-deep in mud, dysentery, and corpses. Who were the Ashigaru? Ashibaru literally means light-footed. Sounds nimble, maybe even elite. Wrong. It meant cheap and disposable. Ashigaru were peasant levies, poor farmers forced or hired to fight. You were pulled from your fields during planting season, handed whatever weapon the quartermaster couldn't pawn off on someone more important, and told to march. Your equipment? Junk. While samurai strutted around in elaborate armor with family crests, you got a helmet that didn't fit, maybe a chest plate, probably from a dead guy, a bamboo spear, straw sandals that disintegrated after 2 days, and the faint hope you'd survive long enough to loot something better. Loyalty? Your loyalty went to whoever was currently feeding you. By the Sengoku period, warlords organized Ashigaru into structured formations. Congratulations, you went from disorganized cannon fodder to organized cannon fodder. You're not some katana-wielding badass, you're holding a stick, wearing someone else's blood-stained gear in sandals that are basically suggestions, praying your lord's rice supply doesn't run out before your legs do.
Daily life, the grind. Training? Most Ashigaru were drafted right before battles. You might get a week learning which end of the spear goes in the other guy. Your armor is scavenged and doesn't fit. It smells like the previous owner died in it because he did. You sleep on the ground, in mud, in rain. You share a blanket with 2 other guys, one with dysentery. Food? If you're lucky, it's watery rice gruel. If unlucky, it's whatever you can forage or steal. Disease killed more soldiers than swords. You watch men waste away, shitting themselves to death, while samurai officers stay in comfortable command tents. And you marched, hundreds of miles, barefoot. Your feet are bleeding disasters. But you keep marching because stopping means punishment, and punishment means death. Discipline was simple. Do what you're told. Don't do what you're not told. Break either rule, you die. Cowardice? Death. Desertion? Death. Stealing? Death. Looking at a samurai funny? Probably death. Your armor's too small, your sandals are falling apart, your spear has a crack, and your lord's banner weighs more than your annual pay. But hey, at least you're serving with honor, right? Battle. Disposable heroes. In movies, battles are elegant duels. In reality, you're packed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of terrified peasants in a pike wall, waiting for the enemy pike wall to crash into yours. You're not a warrior. You're part of a human formation, a component, replaceable. Ashigaru fought in massive formations, Yari's spear walls absorbing cavalry charges, arquebus lines firing volleys, arrow sponges standing in front while samurai archers shot overhead. Guess who took the casualties? You, the frontline infantry. Battles were industrial-scale slaughter. Men screaming, intestines spelling, horses trampling the wounded, the smell of gunpowder and blood and shit. You stabbed whoever was in front of you and prayed a stray arrow didn't end you. If your side won, samurai took credit, collected heads, wrote poems, received rewards. You buried bodies and got told to march tomorrow. A tiny few gained recognition through exceptional kills or loyalty. For every Ashigaru who rose to minor samurai status, 10,000 died in ditches without anyone learning their names. You weren't a hero. You were an expendable number in your lord's spreadsheet of death.
Pay, rewards, and survival. Your pay came in rice, if it came at all. Many went entire campaigns without receiving what they were promised. Samurai got gold and land. You got, maybe, enough rice to not starve. Looting wasn't greed, it was survival. You took armor off corpses because yours was garbage. You stole food because your supply line forgot you existed. Morality is a luxury for people who aren't starving. Could you rise through ranks? Technically, the social mobility rate was roughly equivalent to winning the lottery while being actively shot at. More likely, you die unknown in a ditch, and 50 years later, a samurai poet writes about cherry blossoms, never mentioning the thousands of peasants who made his comfortable existence possible. Let's talk psychology. You lived in constant fear. Fear of battle, starvation, your own officers, punishment for failures you couldn't control, random arrows. The loyalty historians write about, it was transactional, serve or starve. Many Ashigaru deserted or switched sides when the opposing daimyo offered better pay. This wasn't treachery, it was survival. When your current employer hasn't fed you in 3 days and the enemy's offering rice and actual sandals, loyalty becomes negotiable real fast. Honor's easy when you're rich and fed. When you're hungry, watching friends die of infected wounds, haven't seen your village in 2 years, you fight for whoever's got the rice. After the wars. So you survived. You made it through 150 years of warfare. Congratulations. Now what? After unification in 1603, Japan entered the peaceful Edo period. Nobody needs massive armies anymore. Large Ashigaru forces were disbanded. You're unemployed. Your options? Return to farming if your village exists, become a laborer, become a vagrant, or starve. Meanwhile, samurai status became hereditary and fixed. The barely existent social mobility, now legally impossible. And here's the final insult. The noble warrior myth gets codified during this piece. While you're breaking your back in rice paddies, samurai attend tea ceremonies and write philosophical treatises. When the fighting stopped, samurai got poetry and pensions. Ashigaru went home to rebuild the rice fields they'd been forced to abandon.
The Whitewashed History. Fast forward to today. Pop culture has given us Seven Samurai, Sekiro, countless anime centered on noble samurai warriors. The aesthetic is everywhere. The katana, the armor, the code of honor. And the Ashigaru, faceless extras. Background NPCs who exist to die dramatically. The samurai myth is beautiful and marketable. It represents ideals we want to believe in. Honor, loyalty, discipline. But it's built on selective memory and deliberate omission, hiding uncomfortable truths about classism, exploitation, and state propaganda. History remembers the samurai, their names, deeds, philosophies. It forgets the soldiers who made their victories possible. The men who held the line, took the arrows, died in numbers too large to count.
The samurai myth is beautiful, but it's built on the backs of men whose names history never cared to write down. The Forgotten Foundation. So yeah, being a samurai sounds cool until you realize most samurai armies were starving peasants holding sticks they'd used for farming 6 months earlier. The Ashigaru lived and died in mud, bleeding for lords they'd never meet, fighting wars they didn't understand, maintaining the illusion that samurai honor meant something beyond "we win, you die." No epic poems commemorated their deaths. No monuments in their honor. When wars ended, they didn't get parades. They got sent back to fields. So next time you watch an anime where a lone samurai fights for honor, next time you play a game cutting through faceless soldiers, next time you see that iconic warrior beneath cherry blossoms, remember, someone else made that story possible. Someone nameless and barefoot and forgotten. The samurai wrote the history. The Ashigaru bled for it.